Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Analytical Line. I'm Josh Davis. Thank you all for joining me today. Penn State won a big football game against Nebraska this weekend. And then, of course, end of the season against Rutgers next week. It's Thanksgiving this week, so have a happy Thanksgiving. Safe travels if you're going anywhere. It's winter officially. I've heard some people playing Christmas songs. It is definitely still too early to be thinking about Christmas. I think my whole thing is right after Thanksgiving, I'm okay with Christmas stuff, right? But you got to wait the next week. You got to get past Thanksgiving before you start thinking about the next holiday. That's wild to me. If we're not going to celebrate Thanksgiving, then go ahead. You can skip all the wonderful festivities. No turkey for you. You can go straight to Christmas if you want. I personally would rather celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas, but that's just me. So thank you all for joining me. Got a big week. Of course, Penn State had a huge win over Nebraska. It was actually last night. I'm recording this on Sunday, a day earlier, just because of the way the studio was open over break and stuff. But yeah, so today's schedule, I'll talk about the big win over Nebraska, the final regular season game at Rutgers. I'll go around college football, recap week 13. I'll preview week 14. It's rivalry week. I'll get into some of the top matchups. It's actually less stacked on Saturday because there's some big games on Black Friday in the SEC. And then I'll give an updated playoff picture. It's starting to look pretty predictable. Unless some crazy stuff happens. Obviously, with USC losing to Oregon, they're out. That's a player off the table. With Georgia Tech losing, they're a player off the table. So it's starting to clear up. My playoff picture is very similar to how it was last week. And then, of course, I'll end the show with some Penn State hoops talk. They had a tough loss at Providence yesterday. But that's probably a tournament team in Providence, and the team still battled hard in that one. So they got a couple more easy out-of-conference games before a tough game at Indiana in a few weeks. So that's one that you can look forward to. But let's start with Nebraska, right? And this game against Nebraska started with the defense. Aggressive and clutch. Nebraska, they were held scoreless several times in the red zone, highlighting that bend, don't break mentality of the Jim Knowles defense, right? We talked about this a million times when he was at Ohio State last year and in years before that. It was this guy, he might give up a few big plays here and there, but man, he is tough to score on once you get into that red zone. And that was on full display last night against Nebraska. And more importantly, Penn State held Nebraska to just 1 for 6 on fourth down. Those 5 turnovers on downs completely changed the game. If you listened to this show before, you know I treat turnovers on downs like turnovers. They are so crucial. And when you get 5 turnover on downs in a game, it's exactly like it sounds. You got 5 turnovers. That would completely change a game. And when I say that Penn State's defense completely dominated Nebraska got some yards. They got a couple big plays here and there. The key was that Penn State won all the crucial downs. They made all the crucial plays. The important ones were won by Penn State. Those D linemen, Yvonne Kemaju, Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, had dominant games. Linebackers Dom DeLuca and Amari Campbell racked up the tackles. The DBs as a whole played their best game of the season. This defense just a few weeks ago was playing selfish football. They weren't connected as a team. This week against Nebraska, the defense played as a team. They were flying to the football at all times. Darius Dixon has been incredible lately. Alex Tash has emerged in a big way. A.C. Collins looks like a runaway truck every time he goes to hit somebody. There were a couple hits that he made that you just go, oof, like, wow. I feel bad for the other team on that one. Kenny Wosley had a huge play on special teams, stopping a Nebraska kick return at the 10-yard line. Emmett Johnson for Nebraska still had a couple of big plays, right? But outside of that, Penn State did a wonderful job of containing one of the most dynamic players in the Big Ten. Offensively, that was the most efficient game of the season by far. Right off the bat, Kaytron Allen was leading the way with a 50-yard run, and he ended up with 25 carries for 160 yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Penn State rushing record. Nick Singleton had 44 rush yards and 2 touchdowns, as well as leading the team in receiving with 51 yards. On Senior Day, in their last game in Beaver Stadium, this was a special game for this duo. These guys have played for 4 full years for this team, battled through injuries, battled through big wins and tough losses, losing Coach Sider and adapting to Coach Drayton. They came back for one last season to play for a national championship. And yet, despite the losses and the chaos with Penn State this season, these guys have been the cornerstones for this offense. They have done the opposite of give up. They've doubled down on what it means to play for Penn State, and they've cemented themselves as legends of the blue and white. Fat Man, he's now the leading rusher in Nittany Lions history. In Singleton, he's now tied with Saquon Barkley for the most rushing touchdowns. He's surely to break that record next week. It's just incredible to see what these guys have done throughout their careers. Just because this season was a little disappointing does not mean that these guys are disappointing players. These guys are legendary. Ethan Grunkmeyer's development has been fascinating to watch. He started his first game at Kinnick Stadium, and he followed that up with solid performances against the 2 best defenses in the country in Ohio State and Indiana. He's sped up his progressions, his feet are more comfortable and more sound, and his confidence is growing with every passing day. Grunk's passer rating of 246 is the best from a Penn State quarterback since Drew Aller last year and Week 1 against West Virginia. Basically, Grunk just had the best game for a Penn State quarterback in almost 2 seasons. Grunk went 11 for 12 for 181 yards and a beautiful touchdown to Andrew Rappelier. Trevor Pena was open for big plays several times throughout the game, and Devontae Ross, Kobe Howard, and Kyron Hudson all connected on important plays as well. Kyron Hudson's blocking was electric. He found ways to contribute in a game when Penn State was just physically dominating all night long. And I think that starts from the top, right? The turnaround led by Terry Smith has been the most encouraging part of Penn State's season. Just over a month ago, James Franklin left Beaver Stadium for the final time to a deafening rain of boos and "Fire James Franklin" chants. Last night, Terry Smith left Beaver Stadium to a raucous "Terry, Terry, Terry." If you were at the game last night, you're a true fan. 30 degrees, weekend before Thanksgiving break, to cheer on a 4-6 team. Those are the true fans. Those are the people that truly care about Penn State, and those are the people's opinions that I care about. And those people made their opinions very clear, that they want Terry Smith as their head coach. The aggression and the composure that he's shown over the last month proved to me that nobody else in the world would be right for this job. Nobody loves the team more than him. For James Franklin, this was a business, right? Yeah, he loved his players and coaches and especially his paycheck, but James Franklin didn't truly love Penn State. He's going to do everything that he does at Virginia Tech, and he could do it anywhere else. And that's awesome for him. But Terry Smith, after seeing him take the reins last month, I couldn't see him anywhere else but where he is right now. And listen, we saw the exact same situation with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame a few years ago. The similarities are just uncanny with how that team rallied around Marcus Freeman the same way that this Penn State team is rallying around Terry Smith. It hasn't been perfect for Freeman, right? But the results speak for themselves. That's one of the top programs in the country right now. Marcus Freeman is doing things that Notre Dame fans could only dream of when Brian Kelly was there. And I think the Penn State fans need to understand the possibility of Terry Smith doing the same thing in State College. When you have a guy doing fake punts up 20 points in the fourth quarter because he knows that's the way to get his team the most success, that's the kind of mentality that I want in my leader. When you have a guy that's getting emotional in press conferences because that's how much he loves Penn State, that's what I want in my head coach. When you have a guy that gets carried off the field in his first win and then comes home to a stadium of 100,000 loyal fans chanting his name, that's the guy that I want at Penn State. The sooner that Penn State announces Terry Smith as their head coach, the better. The key is exuding stability within the program, showing recruits, transfers, and donors that they can know what to expect for the future of Penn State football. Right now, there is uncertainty, right? A lot of it. Don't get me wrong. It's interesting, and it's great for media and my show going on here and being able to talk Kalen DeBoer and Brian Hartline, and those are great coaches. But are you saying that Brian Hartline is so good at recruiting that you're willing to put your requirements for a head coach aside? I'll put it this way. If you want somebody who loves Penn State, maybe go hire someone that's going to love Penn State. Don't go and hire someone that's been a Buckeye his entire life, right? And you also can't wait until after the playoffs. I've mentioned this before on my show. You need recruits. You need transfers. And you need to get on that trail early. You can't wait until after the playoffs, and no coach is going to leave their team while they're still competing for a national championship. So if your coach is making the playoffs, and most of the candidates that Penn State still has out there are probably going to make the playoffs. Whether it's the JMU coach, the Alabama coach, or the Ohio State offensive coordinator, it seems like those are the top guys floating around right now. Not only are those not the elite candidates that Penn State wanted a month ago, those aren't guys that are feasibly coming to Penn State, and those aren't guys that feasibly would be good fits at Penn State. I love Brian Hartline. I think he's a wonderful coach, but you have to step back and realize that hiring a coach from Ohio State to be the head coach of Penn State might not be the best culture fit. Let me get a quick drink, and I'll talk about Rutgers this upcoming weekend. Who would have thought that Ethan Grunkmeyer would be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten at the end of this season? Huh? He's third in the conference in passing yards. He has 17 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. Him and his favorite receivers, KJ Duff and Ian Strong, have been the bright spots for Rutgers this season. Their defense, that's been a different story. They've given up at least 20 points in every Big Ten game they've played. Their defense is by far the worst in the conference. An average of 425 yards allowed per game and 7.5 yards per play. That's just brutal. It's almost 50-50 in rushing yards and passing yards, and Rutgers is the 8th worst rush defense in the country. An average of 201 yards per game on the ground allowed. What does this mean, right? It means another heavy dose of Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen. Ethan Grunkmeyer will look to stay efficient and be surgical with taking his shots downfield. The Penn State defense, bring the heat. Grunkmeyer needs time to find his elite receivers, and Jim Knowles can follow the game plan from his former team, Ohio State, as the Buckeyes shut down Rutgers last week. Against OSU, Grunkmeyer went only 10 for 20 for 81 yards, and he was sacked 4 times. It was by far his worst game of the season, and he might be in for another rough time if Penn State's defensive front can put some pressure on him. My prediction, Penn State 38, 10 for Rutgers. Terry Smith and Penn State have a chance to end the season on a 3-game winning streak and make a bowl game, something that seemed impossible a month ago. Shea Stadium should be packed with Penn State fans wearing white, supporting the team on the road, and the Nittany Lions' dominance over Rutgers over the years goes without saying. But what the heck, it's so much fun, I'm going to say it anyways. Penn State has won 17 in a row against Rutgers, and the last 10 games they've played, they've held the Knights to 10 points or less. I'm expecting another big win in this one for the Nittany Lions to end their regular season with a bang. Now let's talk about Week 13, some of the top games and top results from a fun weekend of football, I got to start with that Notre Dame game, right? The Irish were up 21-0 in the first quarter before their offense even touched the field. They had a pick six, a blocked punt touchdown, and another pick six, followed by long Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price touchdowns. That had the Irish up 35-0 at the end of the first quarter. The Notre Dame defense is scoring more points than most teams' offenses. They ended up beating Syracuse 70-7. Notre Dame is simply playing the best football in the country. Nobody looks scarier than the Irish, and they deserve a home playoff game come December. Oregon took down USC to the tune of 42 points as they cemented themselves into the playoffs. The Ducks improved their resume, and now they just need to beat Washington to get to an 11-1 season, which I would say is a lock, except for the fact that the Huskies have been Oregon's kryptonite lately. So we'll see if they can pull off another upset against Dan Lanning. Oklahoma took down Missouri, shutting down Bo Prabula in his return, only allowing 6 points. However, I'm not sold on the Sooners still. Missouri outgained Oklahoma in this game, and the majority of Oklahoma's offense was one big play in the second quarter. John Mateer is still struggling a lot. I mean, struggling might even be an understatement at this point. This guy went from being a top Heisman candidate to getting hurt to now just being straight up bad. He went 14 of 30 for 173 yards in this game, and the Sooner defense has relied heavily on opponents faltering in the red zone, which I was just mentioning earlier might be a skill, right? Obviously, the Oklahoma defense is just really good and tightens up in the red zone, but it still doesn't give me confidence that they're getting outgained by teams that aren't in the top 25. If OU beats LSU in their last game, they will be in the playoffs, but this team feels like a first-round exit waiting to happen. BYU evaded Cincinnati to keep their playoff hopes alive. Brendan Sorsby passed for 300 yards but only mustered 14 points, and BYU now plays UCF to finish things off. They still need some help to make the CFP at large, but the Cougars should have one more chance against Texas Tech in the Big 12 championship. I think it's one of those things where if they win, they're in, obviously, with the auto bid, and if they lose, they're out. Pitt went on the road and destroyed Georgia Tech as Brent Key's defense faltered once again. Virginia and SMU are now in line for the ACC title game, which opens the door for an extra G5 team like JMU to make the playoffs. I think if Virginia wins the ACC, they'll probably get that 12 seed over JMU, especially with how the committees disrespected JMU and the fact that JMU struggled against Washington State this last weekend. They really need to pass the eye test more than anything right now. But I think if SMU wins the ACC, I think JMU gets in ahead of them. It's that simple. Let's talk about Week 14, some of the top games for you to watch this weekend. Due to Thanksgiving break, there's a stacked slate of games on Friday, on Black Friday, including some games with some playoff implications. Georgia takes on Georgia Tech, which seemed like it was going to be a huge game until Tech's defense decided to leave the chat a few weeks ago. Actually, it's more likely that GT's defense was just never good, but it's crazy how bad they look all of a sudden. UGA is the best team in the SEC in my opinion, and they should roll in this one. Friday night, Texas A&M gets their first test of the season in the last week of the season. Crazy that an SEC team has had an easier schedule than just about every Power 5 team when they face Texas. The Aggies have shown many signs of weakness throughout this season, but their schedule's been extremely favorable, and they were able to avoid upsets against Arkansas and South Carolina. I'm predicting the Longhorns to win this one, simply because they're more tested, but also because it would be more fun, right? Because it would create the question of who would face Bama in the SEC title game. If my calculations tiebreakers are correct, which they're not always correct, it would be Georgia, and then we would get another boring Georgia-Bama SEC title game. You can debate whether that's more fun or not. I don't know. On Saturday, there's the biggest game of the week. Of course, the game. Michigan, Ohio State. And Ohio State has been the most consistent team in football this season, rolling through their schedule, which always ends with a bang against Michigan. The Wolverines have had their number lately, but is this the year that the Buckeyes finally break the streak? OSU is in the Big Ten title game no matter what happens, but a win for Michigan would propel them into the playoffs. At 3:30, you get to choose between some potential upsets, whether it's Oregon at Washington and LSU at Oklahoma. Both of them feel kind of unlikely to me, but if one of them's surprising and pulling off an upset, put it on your TV and enjoy some cinema. At night, there's the Iron Bowl, which no matter how good Bama is and how bad Auburn is, this game never makes any sense. Jackson Arnold was predictably mid, Hugh Freeze was mid and then fired, and Auburn has had a season full of close losses. The Tigers have fought better against top teams all year long, but have just been unable to finish off an upset. Of course, this one would be the sweetest of them all for fans all across the country. Let's talk about the playoff picture here. It's very similar to last week. I still got Indiana at 1, Ohio State at 2, Notre Dame at 3, Texas Tech at 4, Georgia at 5, Texas A&M at 6, Ole Miss at 7. I flipped Oregon and Oklahoma, so I got Oregon at 8, Oklahoma at 9. I got BYU at 10, North Texas at 11, and then I got James Madison at 12, replacing Georgia Tech, who lost last week. That 12 spot is interesting. You really got to think that James Madison is going to be ranked this week in the CFP poll, but if they're not, I really got to stop talking about him for the playoffs because with Virginia, I'm thinking if Virginia wins the ACC, they're getting that spot, right? And, of course, that other G5 spot, it's looking like it's going to be either Tulane or North Texas, and I'm just predicting North Texas. They have the best offense in the country. Drew Mestemaker's looking like the best quarterback in the country. So I think that would be a really fun team to put in the playoffs and see if they could make some noise. You got one of those just electric G5 teams in there. That would be really tough to play against. But, yeah, I think Virginia has a solid shot to make the playoffs if they win out. The key is if SMU or even Pitt wins the ACC, I don't think they get in over somebody like JMU. Let's talk some Penn State hoops for a few minutes, and then I'll finish things off. Penn State had a solid but not great week of basketball. They played well in a win over Harvard on Wednesday and then lost a tough one to Providence on Saturday. They struggled to handle the interior size of the Friars, and the young Ivan Juric and Sasha Siani have some work to do. Freddie Dilian and Melatunja continue to lead the team offensively, and the depth that Mike Rhoades has is just wonderful. Providence is likely a bubble team for the tournament, so that's the toughest opponent Penn State will play for a while. They have 2 games at the BJC over break, so if you're in State College this week, come to the Penn State basketball games and support the squad. They play Boston University on Tuesday night, and then on Saturday night after the football game, they play Sacred Heart. Some more chances for the development for the youngest team in the Power 5. And the improvement from this group has already been awesome to see, right? If they can get this much better in a month, just imagine the potential for this group for the rest of the season and over several seasons. The main areas to work on are the three-point shooting and the physicality inside. Once this team gets set up in their full court press and once they develop consistency in transition, Penn State will be a lot of fun to watch this year. That'll be all for my show this week. I just really hope that Pat Kraft does the right thing here. Don't overcomplicate it, right? Terry Smith deserves it, and he looks like the top guy for the job. It's very obvious the players all want him, holding signs after the game on the field saying, "Hire Terry Smith," in all caps. So, and then in terms of retaining roster talent, it's pretty clear once you get the right voice leading the team, this team has lots of talent. And yeah, a lot of the top guys are leaving the NFL. There's a lot of crucial young guys that Penn State absolutely needs to keep on this roster. I'm not going to point out names yet. I'll do that in the offseason once I have nothing else to talk about. But it'll be really crucial to keep some of those, not just recruits, but guys that are on the current team, some of those underclassmen. And I think if you hire Terry Smith, those are guys that would love to play for him. Those are the guys that are supporting Terry Smith right now. And if it came down to staying at Penn State, where you have a wonderful opportunity to play for your assistant coach that's now head coach, you get a lot of continuation there, or going and transferring over to Virginia Tech or anywhere else, I think the decision would be pretty easy. It's like, stay home. Whereas if you bring in somebody else, it's a full reset, and it's starting to look like a full reset with somebody who does not have really any connections to Penn State. I'm not sure very many fans would like that, and I for sure wouldn't be completely on board with that. So I trust Pat Kraft, man. I heard that he's going to be interviewing Terry Smith this week. Hopefully that goes well, and we'll see what happens with it. I'll be watching the Rutgers game this week. If you see me at any of the basketball games, please say hi. And make sure you show out at the BJC and support the squad. That'll be all for this week. And as always, go Nittany Lions.